Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on YouTube as well as on Twitter and on Instagram. As always, I am Bryson Carver. It's very excited to be with you on this Friday. We've got a ton to talk about, particularly in the NBA playoffs as well as in the National Football League. Some Dak Prescott news. I must admit, from a narrative show perspective, made me a little sad. The Here We Go cadence looks to officially be dead. Get to that in 30 minutes, why it actually does matter for Dak statistically in terms of his production. The Brian Schottenheimer, new head coach of the Cowboys, seems to be wanting to implement. Get to that in a half hour or 45 minutes or so. Why Shedeur Sanders, to me, has to be the week one starter for the Cleveland Browns, or at the very least be there by October, be the number one guy in Cleveland. And at the end of today's show, why Patrick Mahomes is due for what could be a terrifying MVP campaign in 2025. I'll explain exactly why at the end of today's show. Also getting to, how could I forget, in about 20 to 25 minutes, Oklahoma City making the finals. We're not shocked at all by that. They did it in as many games as I thought they would. Thunder in 5. And why their style of building their basketball team kind of fits with how the modern basketball team should be built under the new NBA CBA. Get to that in about 25 minutes from now. But first, so we're going to do something a little bit different for this opening segment. Usually I start the show, go on an opening rant, and then transition to the next topic. Well, I'm going to give a recap of this game for the Knicks, which they won Game 5, by the way, 111-94. Not only kept the season alive, but kept Inside the NBA on TNT alive. So that's a good win for the fans, of course. But not just that. I'm going to do a segment within a segment, a Carving Up the Context segment regarding 3-1 comebacks in NBA history, but we'll get to that in about 10 minutes or so, maybe less than that. But the Knicks win last night, 111-94. Jalen Brunson was fantastic. We can show you his numbers in Game 5. Dropped 32, 5 and 5 on 12 of 18 shooting, 4 for 7 from three-point range. So Brunson was fantastic. And really the fascinating aspect of this basketball game, really a few to me, has been Brunson. I've said all series long, and especially after Game 4 when Halliburton put together by far the best individual performance of the series through 5 games when he gave a 32-point triple-double on crazy efficiency, but more so 0 turnovers, is that people were saying, oh man, Halliburton's been way better than Brunson this series. In the margins, in the big moments, without question. I've said, while Brunson is the clutch player of the year, deservedly so, Halliburton's the most clutch player in basketball. I don't care what anybody says. 12 of 14 on shots to tie or take the lead this season. That's the most clutch player in the NBA. With all of that said, this weird narrative going around that, man, Brunson just hasn't stepped up. Brunson's been excellent. He's averaged 33 points per game in the series. We can actually show you sort of the weird issue is that Brunson's been great. Cat's been great. We can show you those numbers because they have been fantastic in this series. Brunson's giving you 32 points and 5 assists on 51% shooting, 36% from three-point range. Cat's giving you 25 and let's call that 12, round up, 25 points and 12 rebounds, 51% shooting, just like Brunson, 42%, so better from three-point range. They've both been fantastic. I mean, Brunson last night gave you 32. Karl-Anthony Towns gave you a 24-point and 13-rebound performance. They were great. I mean, Cat was flexing on the Pacers late after an M1. Like, they both look excellent from start to finish. And they generally, Cat's had some weird moments. I think it was Game 2. He didn't score the last 9.5 minutes of the game. They've had some weird moments individually. And then together, how were they a minus 21 together as a duo coming into Game 5? That doesn't make any sense. Or does it? Maybe, just maybe, the New York Knicks and Tom Thibodeau may have stumbled into 2 things that could help them in Game 6, and dare I say, for the decisive Game 7, should we get there on Monday night. Number 1, Tibbs, buddy, I've been saying it. This guy on the street said it. She said it. Everybody said it. Please use your bench. That's all we're asking. Not saying you got to rely on your bench. Not saying it's got to be like, the Timberwolves in Game 4 where your bench gives you 60 points. But Brunson could use a rest. Cat could use a breather from time to time. Josh Hart, Lord knows he definitely could deserve a breather. OG, Mikal Bridges. Knicks took their starters out with about 2 minutes left. But look at the minute totals for these guys. Jalen Brunson played 34 minutes. For an Eastern Conference Finals game? That's shocking for Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks. Sorry for knocking the camera over for a moment. Karl-Anthony Towns, 36 minutes. Bridges, Anunoby, also 34. Mitchell Robinson doesn't play a ton of minutes as is, but 20 minutes. Josh Hart giving you what he gives you. But still, 34 minutes from Josh Hart. That's something. He utilized guys off the bench. Obviously, Josh Hart goes without saying, but he utilized guys like Landry Shamet, who was really good and had some good, or at least had some good moments in Game 3. He was right. I'm sorry, my bad. Miles McBride coming off the bench, who's been a solid scorer for the Knicks. If nothing else, even if they don't give you great productivity, man, Brunson needs a breather on the bench. So does Cat. So does Josh Hart. You got to give these guys rest. Not only that, let's not just give these guys rest. Let's be efficient when they're on the floor. What does that mean? Because we know what they give you offensively. All right, these games have been high scoring. The Knicks have had really their best offensive series of these playoffs, yet they trailed 3-2 because they've been terrible on the defensive end. And in large part, listen, the Pacers are a team that likes to play up and down. I've joked that they play to their team name. The Pacers play with a lot of pace. They have the last few seasons since Halliburton's been their number one guy. But if you look at the first 4 games of the series, in terms of Pacer scoring, 135, 114, 100, lowest scoring game of the series, and then 130 in Game 4 when Halliburton exploded and Siakam gave you 30. Last night, 90 points. That's something. You can maybe hang your hat on that. If you are just, you don't have to outscore the Pacers in the series, because if it comes down to that, as great as Brunson is, as weirdly consistent as Cat has been, by and large, at least compared to previous series that he's played in Minnesota, and likewise, they've been great scoring the basketball, but you're not going to outscore the Indiana Pacers to win a series. That's just not, that's how they want you to play. That's how they wanted Milwaukee to play, and it didn't work. That's how they wanted Cleveland to play, a defensive-minded team. It didn't work. So for Tibbs, who historically is a defensive coach, for a Knicks team that's built on hard-nosed, tough, Brunson's going to give us 30, Cat's going to give us 25 and 10, you better lock into that end of the floor just to make the job of the Pacers much harder. Now, if you look at Indiana, ironically, it was their bench that really did majority of the productive score. I mean, Benedict Mathurin gave you 23 after having kind of a rough series up until Game 4. Halliburton was awful, only had 6 points and 7 shots. Siakam went from 30, cut that in half to 15. Look down the roster, Nesmith had 3. Boy, Knicks fans were like, man, we much rather would have seen that than the barrage he had at the end of Game 1. So I think the keys are there for the Knicks. Can we lock into the defensive end? Can we, particularly, and I think this will help the defensive end, cut the minutes of Brunson slightly, and Hart and Cat, to make sure they're fresh for these for the fourth quarters of these games. Now, I'll say this. The Pacers are favored to win Game 6. They should be. 3.5 feels about right. I'd probably have it closer down to 3. Tomato. We know Indiana's going to come out. We know Halliburton's going to score more than 6 in Game 6. That goes without saying. This sort of transitions me a little bit into my segment within a segment. And for those that may be wondering, what the heck is this guy talking about? It's time for Carving Up the Context, baby, as the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes primetime, Shedeur Sanders, says, give me my theme music. This week's edition of Carving Up the Context, we are going to use a historical context. Now, bear with me over the course of NBA history. So we know in the 78th year that the NBA has existed, there have been only 13 teams ever that have come back from a 3-1 deficit to win a best-of-7 series. The Knicks are looking to be the 14th. Now, there's a number of factors. I looked at all 13 comebacks, and we'll try and briefly go over each one just to sort of provide the context that Knicks fans may want, Pacers fans may not want going into this Game 6, and who knows, maybe for a Game 7, is that there are 3 factors that play into a 3-1 comeback. Injuries, margin of error, and probably the most infamous of all, choke jobs. We all know if you blow a 3-1 lead, the team who won the first 3 games or 3 of the first 4 games had to do something wrong. Something went awry in the last 3 games of that series. It could be they just fell apart because the moment got too big. It could be, man, they got hurt. Or in one case, as we'll see later, there were suspensions involved. Or the series was kind of tight anyway, so it could have went either way, even if it was 3-1. That, to me, is the path for the New York Knicks, to take, because we can show you the margins for the first 5 games of a series. We can go and put this up here. Pacers won by 3 in game 2. Pacers won by 3 in game 1, by 5 in game 2. Knicks won by 6 in game 3. Pacers won by 9 in game 4. And then the Knicks had a barrage from three-point land, and defensively in game 5 won by 17. But total, you see that, Knicks have won the series by 6, despite trailing 3 games to 2. That to me is the primary path, because God knows we don't want to see any injuries to the Pacers or to the Knicks. We don't want to see injuries in any sport. And as far as the choke job aspect, I mean, that's on the board for the Pacers. Ironically, it was Tyrese Halliburton who invoked Reggie Miller at the end of the fourth quarter of game 1. That was, that could come back to bite him potentially. We'll see. But if you look at NBA history, okay? So we'll go over it. We'll try and be as brief as possible. But the 13-3-1 comebacks in NBA history. 1968 Eastern Division Finals, the Celtics came back over the 76ers. They were down 3-1. Here's the context of that. Because really all of my 3 factors, injuries, choke job, and margin of error, factored in. Every Sixers win was by single digits. The Sixers were without Billy Cunningham, who broke his wrist, was out for the playoffs, and Hal Greer had a serious knee issue, and I think Wilt was actually beat up at that point. And in Game 7, Wilt Chamberlain did not attempt a single shot in the second half of Game 7. So whether it was quitting or choking, that's on Wilt. The injuries to Billy Cunningham, Hal Greer, and the margin of error, the games were all close. Like every one of the 4 games essentially, or every one of the Sixers wins in that series were tight. So Boston could have come back. They did come back. 1970 Western Division semifinals. The Lakers beat the Suns. Suns starting center Jim Fox missed Game 5 because, and by the way, that's big because he had been playing really well against Wilt Chamberlain of the Lakers, which started the Lakers' comeback starting Game 5. The Suns then lost the last 3 games after going up 3-1 by 17, 11, and 35 in Game 7. Now, for what it's worth, that 1970s Lakers team had 3 names you may have heard of. Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Wilt Chamberlain. So that's 2 factors to me. Injuries and choke job. 1979 Eastern Conference Finals, the Washington Bullets beat the San Antonio Spurs. The Bullets trailed both Game 6 and 7 going in the fourth quarter, and in that crucial Game 6 in San Antonio, one of the greatest scorers ever, the Iceman, George Gervin, shot 9 of 23. They lost a close Game 6, lost a close Game 7 after blowing a lead late. That falls in the category of choke job. And by the way, anytime we mention choke job, it's not to take any credit away from the winning team, but that had to happen 2 or 3 games in a row for a team to blow the series. 1981 Eastern Conference Finals, you had the Celtics over the Sixers, which is one of the greatest playoff series ever. This actually ended up being the first championship that Larry Bird won with the Celtics. Aside from the Celtics' 19-point win in Game 2, every single game in this series was decided by 10 points or less. The Celtics won Games 5, 6, and 7 by the following: 2, 2, and 1. That, to me, falls into the category of margin of error. Like, the games were close already, so if just a few things go the Celtics' way, that looks like a totally different series. And it did. If the Sixers have blown out Boston in 3 of their wins or 2 of their wins, then I'm probably classified as choke job. But because all of the games, aside from Game 2, which the Celtics won, were close, that goes into the margin of error category. 1995 Western Conference Semifinals. Houston Rockets beat the Phoenix Suns. Charles Barkley was secretly battling a knee injury that he had been dealing with all season long, and he later revealed that had Phoenix beaten Houston, Chuck would have been out for the remainder of the playoffs. Like, it was killing him, even if he played well in that series. Not to mention Danny Manning, who was an all-star guard for the Suns, hurt his ACL before the playoffs even started. Combined with that, in Games 5 and 7, the Suns had a 2-point lead with under 10 seconds left. In Game 5, Hakeem Olajuwon hit a fadeaway to tie the game, go to overtime. The Rockets won. And in Game 7, one of the greatest Game 7 moments in NBA history, Mario Elie, the kiss of death, the 3-point shot to beat the Phoenix Suns. Houston ended up advancing, and they ended up going back-to-back, winning back-to-back titles in 1995. So the combination there is injuries to the Suns and a choke job. Suns were up by 2, under 10 seconds left in 2 of those games. 1997 Eastern Conference Semifinals, this is the weirdest one. In Game 5, P.J. Brown of the Heat and then Charlie Ward, Heisman winner Charlie Ward of the Knicks, got into a fight, got into a scuffle under the basket. Multiple Knicks players rushed in, and there were a number of suspensions. I wrote this down. Patrick Ewing, Charlie Ward, Allen Houston were suspended for Game 6, and John Starks and Larry Johnson were suspended for the remainder of the series. That falls completely under the umbrella of injuries/suspensions. Like the Knicks were totally controlling that series. They lost half their roster. They lost the series to Miami. 2003 Eastern Conference first rounds, Pistons over the Magic. One of the most famous choke jobs, you have to say, in NBA history, because the Magic went up 3-1. God bless him. Tracy McGrady, a young Tracy McGrady, obviously, was interviewed after Game 4 and said, and I quote, "It feels good to go to the second round." The series wasn't over yet. The Pistons proceeded to win games 5, 6, and 7 by 31, 15, and 15 to close the series out. In addition, Doc Rivers was the Orlando Magic's head coach. Remember that. So that goes in the category to me of choke job. 2006 Western Conference first round, Suns over Lakers. First 4 games were decided by 7 or less. And then up by 3 in Game 6, the Lakers allowed an offensive rebound off a Steve Nash miss. And then what was it? Tim Thomas? Tim Thomas of the Suns hit a game-tying 3-point shot. Suns went on to win Game 6. And then infamously in a blowout Game 7, the late, great Kobe Bryant, God bless him, but this was the lowest moment of his professional career, shot 3 times in the second half of that game. Some people label it as the Kobe quit game. So that goes under margin of error, and choke job. 2015 Western Conference semifinals. I remember this one. Rockets over Clippers. So the Clippers blew the doors off the Rockets in the first 4 games of the series. They won their 3 games by 16, 25, and 33. The series gets to Game 6. The Clippers have a 19-point lead at the end of the third quarter. Houston goes on a 51-20 run, majority of it without James Harden on the floor to win Game 6. They go to win Game 7. By the way, Doc Rivers was the Clippers head coach. That falls under the choke job category without question. 2016 Western Conference Finals. I remember this very well and fondly, to be honest. Thunder won games 3 and 4 over the Warriors. Warriors beat the Thunder in the series, obviously. Thunder won game 3 by 28, game 4 by 24. Okay? So big margin of a victory. Up 3-1. Warriors win game 5, goes to game 6. OKC has an 8-point lead going in the fourth quarter. Klay Thompson, the infamous Game 6 Klay game, goes for 19 points in the fourth quarter. Meanwhile, KD and Russell Westbrook combined for 12 on 3 of 14 shooting. The Warriors go on to win Game 7. That falls to me under, and by the way, in addition, for what it's worth, I mentioned that the Lakers were an all-time great team in 70, even though they didn't win the title. Same case with the 16 Warriors. They won 73 games, had the unanimous MVP in Steph Curry. Still falls under choke job. Then the one I hate the most on this list, the 2016 NBA Finals, still have PTSD to this day. Cavaliers beat the Warriors. Now, the Warriors won 3 of the first 4 games in that series on average by 19 points per game. They smoked the Cavs for the first 4 games. But then after that, Andrew Bogut hurt his knee in Game 5, best rim protector in the Warriors, missed the rest of the series. Before that Game 5, in what was one of the most bogus suspensions in NBA history, Draymond Green, who had played a really good finals up to that point, was suspended for Game 5. So missed Game 5 for the Warriors with a chance to close it out. Steph had a bum knee, and Iguodala in Game 6 hurt his back, could barely walk out there. So injuries to the Warriors. But in addition, LeBron dropped 41. So did Kyrie, by the way, in Game 5. LeBron then dropped 41 in Game 6, and then had a triple-double in Game 7, capped by the greatest block in the history of the NBA, and as far as I'm concerned, the greatest defensive play in the history of the NBA. While my man, Steph Curry, who was a 30-point per game scorer in the regular season on 50, 40, 90 shooting, averaged 24 a game, 36% from the field, 35% from 3. That falls into the category of injuries and choke job. The weirdest 3-1 comeback is Nuggets over Jazz in 2020 in the first round. That was kind of a close nip and tuck series throughout. Donovan Mitchell had multiple 50-point games in that series. So did Jamal Murray. Again, sort of a weird margin of error where the Nuggets won by double digits and then the Jazz won by double digits. Goes to a Game 7. Mike Conley rims out a 3-point shot at the end. That, to me, just falls under margin of error, even though there were some double-digit wins there. That was a weird one. Then the biggest choke job, and the most recent 3-1 comeback we had, happened to be the next series the Nuggets played against the LA Clippers, 2020 in the bubble. Clippers led 3-1. They then proceeded to blow a 15-point lead in Game 5, a 19-point lead in Game 6, and a 12-point lead in Game 7. For the record, Doc Rivers was the Clippers head coach. So Doc Rivers, of the 13 3-1 comebacks or 3-1 blown leads ever, Doc Rivers was a part of 3 of them on the losing side. So that's the history. I try to be as brief as possible. The 13 3-1 comebacks in the history of the NBA has to be under the 3 following things: injuries, margin of error, and choke job. To me, obviously, knock on wood, we hope injuries doesn't come to the fray for Indiana or for the Knicks, of course. But to me, it falls under the margin of error and potentially the choke job aspect of it. Because, and I almost don't even understand, I don't even think that'll necessarily come to the fray unless the Pacers just fall apart in fourth quarters, which they're not the type of team that I think would do that. Oddly enough, we know all the pressure is on the Knicks. There's pressure on the Pacers. You better close this thing out in Game 6. But the Knicks have to win Game 6. The Knicks don't win Game 6, they're done. Pacers lose Game 6, they've got a Game 7. And oddly enough, even if the Knicks win Game 6, and everybody in the media, every fan in the world will be like, oh, Knicks got this. They're not going to lose in the Garden. And the atmosphere that will be. They're 4-5 at home. The Pacers, albeit against a hurt Knicks team, won a Game 7 last year in Indiana. I'm sorry, in Madison Square Garden. Beat up Knicks team, I get it. But they've done it before. And not to mention, we talk about the pressure on the Pacers not to blow a 3-1 lead and be the 14th team ever to do that. You want to talk about the pressure on the Knicks? You want to talk about the pressure on the Knicks? Game 7 at home? You got a chance to go to your first finals in 26 years? A championship-starved fan base that hadn't seen a title since 1973. Spike Lee's going to be courtside with Chalamet and Kendall Jenner. Kylie Jenner, my bad. Get the Jenners mixed up. You got Ben Stiller. Stephen A is going to be, all the Knicks faithful is going to be there. Fat Joe and Tracy Morgan. You want to talk about pressure? I'm not kidding. I think it's equivalent. Knicks Pacers for totally different reasons. So I'll just go and say on the front end, because I had OKC in 5. I was correct on that. I had Knicks in 7. Knicks win Game 6 at Indiana. I think they lock in the defensive end. Brunson, it's about time Brunson had a big fourth quarter in this series. Cat has had his. Halliburton has had his twice. I think Brunson's going to have one in a Game 6. So I think it's going to be tight. Maybe the closest game of the series outside of Game 1, which literally went to overtime. Give me the Knicks in Game 6. We get a Game 7, Knicks, Pacers, just like the good old days of the 90s, except there's actually going to be scoring. There's going to be points, unlike there were in the 1990s. So that is it for this week's edition of Carving Up the Context. So, again, the path is there for both squads. Again, I've felt this whole series, honest to God, that the Knicks were the better team. Just in terms of the road they had to take to get here. The Pistons are better than the Bucks, who the Pacers beat. The Celtics, to me, are clearly better than the Cavs. If the Celtics and Cavs matched up, which is what a lot of folks thought we'd get, I'd have had Celtics in 5. I did not buy Cleveland at all. But, excuse me, with respect to Indiana's pace, with respect to Halliburton, who I said has at this point become the most underrated player in the NBA, I think Brunson's due for a big fourth quarter. I think he knows that. I think he understands it. The Knicks finally have a legit shot with a healthy squad deep into the playoffs. And maybe, just maybe, Tibbs stumbled onto something. Maybe I could use my bench a little bit. And when my starters on the floor, our strategy is lock in like hell on the defensive end. Brunson will get his. Cat will get his. And the rest will follow. So, listen, I can't wait for Game 6. Listen, Shaq gave the motivational speech at the end of their pregame show on TNT because folks thought, man, Pacers win tonight. Inside the NBA, TNT, it's over. I know Inside the NBA, thank God, will continue on ESPN, but on TNT, it's a wrap. It's over. It's done. Knicks said no. Get one more episode, at least one more, of Inside the NBA. So, very excited for Game 6. I'm going to take the Knicks in a close one. I'm going to say by 2 points. Brunson has a big fourth quarter. Halliburton responds. I could see this being like a Brunson-Halliburton back and forth type of game. We get a Game 7 Monday night. That's what I'm hoping. Now, if you're somebody who wants the closest finals we can get, understand that Oklahoma City is a 68-win team with the league MVP and the number 1 defense, you probably should pull for the Pacers because in all reality, I think the Pacers, from a stylistic perspective, have a way better chance to beat Oklahoma City than the Knicks do, even though I I'd still probably pick Oklahoma City. We got to see how the rest of the series plays out, but they have a better shot. Styles make fights than the Knicks do to beat the Thunder. From an entertainment perspective, if you feel like Oklahoma City is a sure bet to win the title, knock on wood, injuries out of the picture, you're rooting for a Game 7. Unless you're a Pacers fan, obviously. In that case, let's get this thing over. Let's get over with Saturday night, Game 6. Let's get ready for an NBA Finals matchup against OKC. So it'll be a fun series. Be back after the break to talk about the Thunder, which I just mentioned just a second ago. On to the NBA Finals, first time since 2012. Knocked out the Minnesota Timberwolves in 5 games. To me, there is a clear path for other teams to follow Oklahoma City in terms of how the new NBA CBA is today. Get to that in just a minute on Carving Up Live. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Carving Up Live. So before we get to Oklahoma City, super fast getting this thing ready for the segment because it really kind of shows the run Oklahoma City's been on, the run that Shea's been on. So Thunder close out the Western Conference Finals. They win in 5 games over the T-Wolves. That game 5 was over before it started. Okay, because you had the Timberwolves were an abysmal offensive team in the first quarter, scoring 9 points. They were dreadful throughout. It feels like that game 4, the way that it played out with Ant not playing well, Julius Randle giving you zilch, despite a great performance from the bench. I feel like that was kind of the moment where Minnesota was theoretically and mentally cooked. At that point, we all felt like Oklahoma City was going to win the series, even if it were 2-2, which would have made it fascinating. Best of 3 series, who knows? Anthony Edwards, maybe he takes that next step earlier than we thought. Not the case. Thunder win game 5, or Thunder game 4, win game 5 in a game that they actually led by 33 points at the half. So they wiped the floor with the T-Wolves. They're on to the NBA Finals for the first time since 2012, and they're looking for their first NBA title as the Oklahoma City Thunder. We know the Seattle Supersonics won a title, 1979. I'm gonna be a man of the people of Seattle. That is Seattle's championship. Thunder should not take ownership of that. I know they're the same franchise. Let the Thunder, if they win the title, let them have their title. Let Seattle their title. And for the record, Adam Silver, get a freaking team back to Seattle. Come on, what are we doing? Supersonics were a great fan base. They didn't deserve that. OKC's a great fan base too. Couldn't we just have the Thunder go to Oklahoma City separate from Seattle? I know KD would have been a Thunder, but still, you get what I'm saying. Neither would Westbrook, by the way. Either way, Thunder on to the finals. So let's talk about SGA first, because I feel like, especially this is the clip that's going to go on YouTube as it relates to the Thunder winning the Western Conference. I've said this about SGA because I've sometimes gotten labeled as a member of the SGA is just a foul baiter and nothing else camp. That's an uneducated basketball opinion to have. SGA is a 33-point per game scorer, did it on 51% shooting. That is incredibly difficult. That's hard to do in general. That's hard to do if you were Jokic or Giannis or a guy who just had a physical, height advantage, physicality advantage over everybody else. That's hard to do if you're Shaq. If you're SGA, that's pretty impressive. I know he drives to the basket a lot, but the mid-range is working. The three-point shot, you imagine he'll continue to improve that over the course of his career, but the handle's tight, all of it makes his teammates better. My mindset has been this, because I've said he foul baits in the way Harden foul baits. A different form, but in the same, sort of, it's a first cousin of it. My mindset in my case has been this. Harden needed that to be successful. Harden needed that to be an all-time great offensive player, which the analytics say that he is. Because we saw in the postseason, come playoff time, when Harden didn't get those calls, all of a sudden he wasn't quite as impactful. SGA didn't need those calls. SGA had that big game too, where I think he scored 38. Didn't get to the free throw line much, or certainly didn't quote unquote foul bait the way that we've seen him do in the past, particularly in game 1 of this series when he shot 10 for 27, but still, I think he had 30 points in the game. Might have 30. Yeah, I think he had 30 points in that game. He played well. Is that SGA does not need that to be successful in the way Harden does. That's sort of from an aesthetic standpoint. I know folks have said, oh, people don't like SGA because his game isn't flashy. Maybe so. That's probably why, despite obviously being better than Ant, people tend to gravitate more towards Ant's game because it is flashy. It is the crossover and the finishes at the rim. And now he's added a 3-point shot to his game and the charisma. I get that. I really don't think that's the issue people have with the SGA in general. This is a great dude. He's a great teammate. Obviously a great player. I think he's comfortably in the top 5. He's making a case. He's number 3. To me, it's still clear Jokic and Giannis. It's hard to make it like that 3 spot. For a while, I kind of had Luka there. It's hard to argue that SGA is not a spot above Luka at this particular point in time. But if the Thunder win the title, SGA will be the 4th MVP of the last 20 years to win a championship and win MVP in the same season. He'll be the first guy to do that in a decade, the 4th in the last 20 years. You want to know who those players are? Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Steph Curry. Steph is the most recent guy to win league MVP and win a championship in the same season. He did that in 2015. That's pretty rare. Bron did it for the record. Well, Bron actually did it twice in 2012 and 2013. Kobe did it in 2008. Well, no, he didn't do that in 2008. My bad. It might have been a bad. No, I'm sorry. Last 30 years. Michael Jordan did it. I thought I got that stat wrong. I apologize. I had that down as Kobe Bryant in 08. He actually did that. He won his MVP in 08. Anyways, either way. To me, for Oklahoma City, the fascinating aspect of it is this. Is the way they've constructed their basketball team is very friendly to how the NBA wants you to do your roster today. Now, I've been on record. I despise the new CBA because what the new CBA does essentially is it says, hey, super teams, I know you guys have kind of carried the NBA throughout its history. Our league has generally, in the modern era at least, been its most popular when we do have super teams, but we don't like them. I think the Kevin Durant move to the Golden State Warriors, Adam Silver was openly critical of it at the time. I don't think he's ever quite forgiven. It's not that he doesn't like KD, but I don't think he's ever quite forgiven KD for the backlash that move created in the fan base. People saying, oh, it's not fair and whatever. Despite the fact that there were scenarios in place, such as Steph Curry's early career ankle injuries, that even allowed for that to happen, even allowed for the Warriors to have the money to go get KD. That's beside the point. Adam Silver, NBA said, we're done with super teams in this current CBA. So the Oklahoma City Thunder were like, okay, traded for SGA in 2020 and said, in 2019 and said, okay, that's going to be our lead dog. That's going to be our MVP candidate. We're going to get him a number 2 guy, all-star level player, Jalen Williams. Chet Holmgren is the 2nd overall pick from 2022, missed his first year and has gotten better over the course of his first 2 years in the NBA. Has a potential to be a multi-time all-star, maybe a star, a legit star in the NBA. And then stack a bunch of great, long defensive players who can shoot threes. Lou Dort, Caruso, Hartenstein is a 3-point shooter, but Hartenstein's a good big. This is how we're going to stack our roster. And it's going to, and we've seen, matter of fact, I don't think it's happened either ever in NBA history or happened certainly in the last, it's never happened in NBA history. We've had 7 straight seasons of a different champion, which we're going to have this year regardless of who wins it, Thunder, Knicks, or Pacers, which has never happened in NBA history. This is the NBA Adam Silver wanted. This is the NBA fans said they wanted. The league is still popular. The ratings for the Eastern Conference Finals have actually been really, really good. It's not, I don't imagine, as high as it would be than when the Warriors were crushing everybody, or when, not a dynasty, but when the Heat were crushing everybody with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, or certainly not when the Bulls were crushing everybody in the 90s, the Lakers in the early 21st century. Okay, this is what you wanted, this is what you get. But kudos to Oklahoma City. Since 2012, they have not paid a dime above the luxury tax. I saw a stat where the Warriors have spent like $700 million over the luxury tax, and they have the luxury, pardon the expression, the luxury to do that because San Francisco, Steph has allowed the Warriors to become the second most valuable sports franchise in the world to the Dallas Cowboys. So you have that component onto as well. But the Warriors have basically said, we're not going to get high enough draft picks. We're not the assets to do it. We drafted Steph, Clay, Draymond. We're going to put the best team around them. And even to this day, with Jimmy Butler paid the contract they paid him, they don't care. The Thunder, famously, 2012 finals lose to Miami. They had the big three of KD, Harden, Westbrook. And they said, it's going to be hard to keep Ibaka and Harden. We're going to move Harden to Houston so we don't have to go in the luxury tax. Controversial move. Thunder probably would have won a title had they kept Harden. Maybe, who knows? But Sam Presti, maybe the best GM in basketball, said, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going into the luxury tax. I'm not going in the second apron. You're going to have to give SGA a massive deal, which the Thunder will have no hesitation, rightfully so, in doing that. My guess is at that point, what do we do from here? Giannis is available. I surmise on Wednesday's show, I think it's on the board that for less assets, you could get Kevin Durant from Phoenix. So the future's set. I'm not going to fall into the trap that many have over the last 4 NBA champions, which is say, hey, this team won the title. They're a dynasty. There are a few here, and not really anyone said that about Milwaukee. They just figured, Giannis is going to be in the playoffs, the Eastern Conference Finals, some finals. Giannis actually hasn't been back since, despite actually getting better as a player in the ensuing 4 years. But the Warriors in 22, that was the end of a dynasty. But folks, certainly myself as a Warriors fan, were thinking, hey, 23 the younger players will get better. And that didn't happen. Really, none of them got better. And so you were left with a declined Clay, Draymond, who still gives you what he gives you, and a great Steph Curry with a weird group of role players. Not a lot of veterans, so it didn't work. 2023 Nuggets. I remember everybody the next day after Denver won the title. Dynasty. Jokic, the best player in the world. Jamal's a great playoff performer. Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. His team's a dynasty. And slowly but surely, they've dealt with injuries. The Westbrook experiment didn't work. They've moved off some key role players like KCP, Bruce Brown over the years. Boston last year, dynasty. Got the two superstar Jason Tatum, a star in Jaylen Brown, and great ancillary pieces. Drew Holiday and Peyton Pritchard who won Sixth Man of the Year this year, and Porzingis, and they're a second-round exit this year with horribly Jason Tatum's out next year, and they got real salary cap problems. They're going to have to move off Derek White and or Drew Holiday, and potentially Porzingis. One or two of those three. I'm not going to fall in that trap for Oklahoma City, even though they're certainly the favorite to win the title this year. I think most of us expect them to. And they got a ton of assets, 15 draft picks ahead of 2032. So they're in good shape moving forward. So listen, you give credit where it's due to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And sort of the last point I want to make on Shea, because it is really unbelievable. And it shows that he's in a position to join some all-time territory. So we can show this in terms of champions that won 65 games and had the league MVP. We can show that graphic. Can we put that up there? There you go. Sixers in 66 and 67. Wilt Chamberlain was their best player. Think you've heard of him. He was pretty good. Milwaukee in 1970-71 had Kareem. The Celtics in 85-86 had Bird. Bulls in 91-92 had Jordan. Bulls in 95-96 had Jordan. Lakers in 2000-2001 had Shaq. The Miami Heat 2012-2013 had LeBron. The Warriors 2016-17. Actually, that's a bad graphic too. My goodness, I am off my game with these graphics today. That says 16-17 Warriors. Ladies and gentlemen, it was actually the 14-15 Warriors that had the league MVP, 165 games. My apologies. So bad graphic there on my part. But nonetheless, Oklahoma City could join that group, be the 9th team to have the league MVP and win 65 games. Says a lot about Shea. Says a lot about the way that Presti constructed this team. Yeah, Oklahoma City is a big, big bet to win this finals, and rightfully so. Like I said, rough segment for me on the graphics. I apologize to the audience for that. That was not my best work. Nonetheless, we move on to the NFL. Staying in that area of the country, from Oklahoma City to the neighboring state of Texas, the most popular NFL team in Texas, most popular team in America, most popular team in the world. Although at this point, I was almost getting challenged by the Chiefs, but that's a different discussion for a different day. Dallas Cowboys. So Brian Schottenheimer came out new head coach of the Cowboys, came out and said that he had a quote that was taken out of context about Dax and his development, because he was talking about Joe Milton, go Vols, who the Cowboys traded for, essentially be Dak's backup, and said how Joe Milton was developing, and Dak Prescott's also developing in year 10. That was taken out of context. What Schottenheimer was essentially saying is, hey, everybody here is getting better. Everybody here is learning a new system, developing, learning the new system, and everybody gets better. But he also said that the Cowboys are looking to address an issue that, hey, maybe us football diehards weren't, locked into. Apparently, Dak Prescott's cadence was a problem. The famous, yeah, here we go, appears to be dead. So it looks like we'll never hear Dak Prescott say that in a game again. Now, folks might see that and say, okay, the only thing that impacts me is I don't, it's not the new greatest cadence since Omaha, which is obviously the greatest cadence of all time from the great Peyton Manning. But for the skepticism I have about Dallas, certainly I've voiced my skepticism about Dallas as it pertains to how they run their operation and how they seem to neglect, since 2022, putting legit weapons who keep their head on straight, aside from CeeDee Lamb, with Dak Prescott. Might actually be a smart move by Brian Schottenheimer, and I'll give credit where it's due to Danny Parkins on FS1, who put together a great graphic. I will say in the front end, I use this. Danny Parkins, who was a radio guy in Chicago, is at FS1 now on a show called Breakfast Ball. He put together this graphic. I essentially recreated it on here. Dak Prescott's sack percentage since 2020. We can show you the graphic. So it was only at 4.2% in 2020, went up to 4.7 in 21, stayed that way in 22. It went all the way up to 5.9 in 2023, and then went up again to 6.7 in 2024. Now, you see the biggest jump there came from 22 to 23, is 1.2% in terms of Dak's sack percentage. What started in 2023? The, yeah, here we go cadence. One could make the case that if you're a defensive lineman and you hear the, yeah, here we go, and bam, I'm going to tie my pass rush on Dak. Whereas Dak, before that, usually his thing was, what is that? He would kind of, not in the way Aaron Rodgers is the best I've ever seen in terms of drawing guys off sides, use the green IT, and get guys to jump and get a free play out of it. Dak has actually been a pretty successful guy at that in his career. Apparently not lately, though, as it pertains to the, yeah, here we go cadence, because guys tend to jump and be able to get to Dak. Some of that is the offensive line issues in Dallas. Some of that is Tyron Smith's gone. Zach Martin's retired. Actually, Tyron Smith retired too, but so did Zach Martin. Dallas did address their O-line by taking Booker, the guard out of Bama, which I actually thought was a decent pick because Dallas did have some weaknesses with Zach Martin retired on the interior of their O-line. I don't know. Maybe Brian Schottenheimer's onto something. After all, his dad, I know he didn't win a Super Bowl, God rest his soul, Marty Schottenheimer, but Marty was known to be kind of an offensive innovator. I didn't love the Schottenheimer hiring at the jump. I'm still not crazy about it. Dak, over the course of his career, has dealt with some pretty mediocre play callers, be it Kellen Moore, Scott Linehan, McCarthy, hit or miss. Jason Garrett wasn't that good of a coach. We'll see what Schottenheimer brings to the table. I have serious questions about Dallas's roster. I have real questions about what they can do as it pertains to their cap situation. You guys know how I feel about Dak. I think Dak is one of the most underrated and over-criticized quarterbacks in the league. A lot of that's because he wears a star on his helmet. But maybe this is something that can help him moving forward. Maybe the new cadence that is introduced in Dallas allows him to get sacked less. That's a good thing for the Cowboys. A good thing for Dak. So, and for the record, for what it's worth, last time Dak Prescott won a season, start to finish, he was second for league MVP. Almost like he's pretty good. So, for you Dak haters, shove it. Maybe this will work. I don't know. I'm willing to be open to the possibility. Now, if we're in week 8 and Dallas is, 2-6 and Dak's having a mediocre season, maybe this is overblown. Maybe this was just a late May topic in the NFL that we're just trying to incorporate into the show to fill space. Or maybe it's something. I think, numbers show, we can show you the graphic one more time. He started saying, here we go in 2023. The sack percentage started to go up precipitously. It's something. That's all I'll say. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's go to Cleveland, where the Browns have 4 quarterbacks on their roster. None of them make particular sense as it relates to the quarterback room together. because you have Kenny Pickett, who's on his third team in 4 years, and obviously was the failed franchise quarterback in Pittsburgh with my Steelers. You have Joe Flacco, who's making a second stop to Cleveland and is in, I think, his 18, 19, 20th season in the NFL. He's been around for a while. And then the Browns drafted Dylan Gabriel 3rd round, Shedeur Sanders 5th round. So thus far, with what's being reported out of Browns camp, Browns mini camp, Shedeur's been the best guy. The Browns came out with a stat line of what these quarterbacks did. Shedeur Sanders, I think, went 9 of 11, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. I'm going to say on the front end, he should be the week 1 starter. If not him, it should be Flacco, because Flacco has history with Kevin Stefanski. Flacco infamously had Browns fans fooled, Cleveland fans fooled. I say that a lot in my show. To think that they could go on a playoff run in 2023 until he threw a bunch of picks, because he had thrown a bunch of picks up to that point, as we talked about on the show. Nonetheless, the safe bet, let's start Flacco. What I'm hearing right now, or what's being reported out of Browns camp, is right now Kenny Pickett is the front runner in the clubhouse. Kenny Pickett, who was a disaster in Pittsburgh, who was the backup to Jalen Hurts, started a couple of games and was fine in the Washington game, not very good in the Dallas game, and then Hurts finally came back to the playoffs and was, well, Jalen Hurts. He had a big-time run, particularly in the Super Bowl. Kenny Pickett's not very good. Small, tiny hands, that matters for quarterbacks unless you're Joe Burrow or Jared Goff, or although for Goff it matters a little bit, I guess, because he's not as mobile as Burrow can be. He's not the guy. Joe Flacco is probably your best right now option. He's not the best long-term option. Dylan Gabriel has some physical limitations I don't love. I wasn't crazy about him as a pro quarterback. Liked him in college. He's the all-time leader, FBS leader in touchdown passes, but that's because he hung around for a long time. I think Shedeur is going to be the Browns starter by week 8. So if we can show the Browns schedule, if we can pull this up here for what Cleveland's got moving forward, okay? So they starting in Cincinnati, go to Baltimore, yikes. Packers, Lions, Vikings, at the Steelers, Dolphins, Patriots. So if you look at their first few games here, make sure I've got this right. That's 6-8. Shedeur Sanders can make a first start of his career at the Jets. And then from there, Baltimore, that's tough, but that game's at home. At the Raiders, listen, they've got a great pass rush, Max Crosby, but the Raiders are still kind of rebuilding. Niners, that's brutal. That's a great defensive line. Titans aren't. Bears aren't. Bills aren't. The Steelers are. The Bengals, we'll see what their pass rush situation is. So what I'm saying is the second half of the season, the Browns aren't playing a lot of great pass rushes. So that could be an opportunity to get Shedeur in there, get him some legit snaps. We know the Browns obviously aren't a playoff team, particularly out of the AFC North. Let's get him snaps, start him the last 2/3 of the season, if you will, and see what we've got here. Because, listen, I was in the camp that thought it was absolutely, utterly absurd. Not only that Shedeur went 5th round, but the guys that went ahead of Shedeur. Cam Ward is better than Shedeur. I'm fine with that. I was not crazy about Jackson Dart ahead of Shedeur, but you can make the case. There's some stuff there. My contention is he was in the Lane Kiffin system at Ole Miss, which is a pro system, and he wasn't that good against the best teams in the SEC. After that, Tyler Shough from Louisville, a guy who has multiple injuries and has been in college football since 2018. He was good in college. Don't get me wrong. He was good at Louisville. Really? Dylan Gabriel, not the injury history of Shough, but was in college for a while. All-time leading touchdown passes in part for that reason. And then the most insulting of all to me, Jalen Milroe, who is the definition of a project quarterback. I saw him play live. I saw him play multiple times at Bama. Monster arm. Probably the best arm in the draft, even over Ward. Boy, he's hit or miss accuracy-wise. He's not great in the pocket. Like he can be good, but he needs some serious development. He should not be on an NFL field for the first 1.5, 2 years of his career. Then Shedeur. So, and I see my dad is in the comments on IG. He says if it starts day 1, it sets him up for failure. Week 8. Like, again, get through the great pass rushes that the Browns will face to start the season. Week 8 on, we know at that point, I imagine the Browns will be like 1-7, 2-6. I like Stefanski. I don't buy Andrew Berry, the GM, and the roster. We know it's not very good. There's a reason that they had as high of a pick as they did. But get him on the field. Get him snaps. Listen, He's pro ready. I've said that from the jump. Like, I'm not of the mindset Shedeur is going to be a great quarterback. Can he be a franchise quarterback? Can he be Baker Mayfield to a Brock Purdy level? Actually, putting Baker in that category is a little insulting. Baker's a top 10 quarterback. Brock Purdy, Jordan Love to a Tagovailoa level? Sure. Yeah, he can be that. He dealt with a bad O-line at Colorado, and yet and still very accurate. To me, the biggest knock on Shedeur on the field is the arm strength. It's not great. And that's for cold weather cities, you like to have, big arm quarterbacks. You like to have a Mahomes in Kansas City. Burrow's the only guy that can really make it work, but that's because he is off the charts accurate. But Josh Allen in Buffalo, that works. Brady, people used to say Brady didn't have a big arm. Brady could sling it. Brady he may not have been Big Ben or something like that. Brady could throw it down the field. There's no question about it. And so that's the biggest knock to me on Shedeur, but moves pretty well. Dealt with a bad O-line, dealt with the scrutiny that usually comes with being a pro quarterback in college, in part because of his dad, in part was generated by him, and the media attention was on Colorado the last 2 years, so he's used to that. He's used to being in the spotlight. So the NFL is not going to be an adjustment for him. So, listen, the downside is obviously the Browns are, I've said the Jets are the place where all quarterback streams go to die. The Browns are a very close second, maybe even worse, because they at least have Mark Sanchez for a brief period, who was okay, I guess, with that great Jets defense when they went to the title game. So there you go. I see my dad says, I'll take accuracy over arm strength. If you're erratic, yeah, there's no question about that. And I mean, that's what to me has made, while we're on the topic of talking about elite quarterbacks, that to me is what's made Josh Allen so dangerous over the last couple of years, or particularly this year at least, was my biggest knock on Josh was, holy crap, he's so talented. Whew, he's erratic. He is all over the place in terms of not just accuracy, which he gradually got better. He completed 52% of his passes rookie year. He was bad in that regard. He's gotten better. But decision-making all over the place, man. He was, even in that AFC title game against Kansas City, there were moments he didn't turn the ball over, but he looked a little jittery. He's addressed that. He's gotten better accuracy-wise. So when you combine that with mobility, size, and arm strength, now you got a superstar. Now you got a guy that won the league MVP. That's what's taken Josh to a new level. So there you go. So let's see. I think I've got a comment here, potentially. Danny is in the comments. Come to a basketball game in Europe once. You'll see what the atmosphere is like. Crazy fans, smoke flares, songs, jumps. Listen, I'll say this. I've seen the videos on IG of overseas basketball, and I see why Luka Doncic said, yeah, America's easier. Like, in terms of you'll see like explosions in the stands while you got to try and focus on a basketball game. Meanwhile, the worst thing, barring racial stuff, the worst thing that you could see in an NBA arena is, I don't know. I remember a few years ago, the Kings did a cold as ice sound effect every time Russell Westbrook missed back when Russ was with the Lakers. That's about the worst you'll get compared to Europe. So in terms of the atmosphere that players have to deal with at times there. So there's some fairness in that take there. Last segment, again, on the topic of elite quarterbacks, let's talk about Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. So Mahomes at a press conference, mandatory minicamp is soon coming up right now for NFL teams. And Mahomes was interviewed. He was talking about how this could be a bounce back year for Kelsey, all of it. He said that the most notable thing I think he said that got a lot of buzz was, hey, the Super Bowl loss to Philadelphia was good for us. Of course, there have been some that have pushed back and said, if Kansas City had won that Super Bowl three-peated, I know Mahomes would not have come into minicamp and said, hey, what would have been better for us? Losing the Super Bowl. Especially losing the Super Bowl in the fashion that they did when they were down 34-0 and then at 40-7 after they scored before they scored two garbage time touchdowns to make the score look a little better, even though it was still a blowout on the scoreboard. I think Mahomes is about to have a monster year, and I'll say that, and I'll explain why. So think back to that 2021 season, which was up until the Super Bowl, the last bad Mahomes playoff game. Remember they were up, I think they were up 21-3 on Cincinnati and then absolutely collapsed, Mahomes being the leader of that. He threw some bad picks. He was taking awful sacks in the second half of that Bengals game. And since of course, through the game, not gaming interception, but the pick in overtime that got the Bengals into field goal range, they walked it off, went to the Super Bowl, knocked the Chiefs out. They traded Tyreek Hill. And that's kind of been the thing that Mahomes defenders have said, man, could you just get the guy number one receiver? For as great as he is, we saw that. I mean, he threw 50 touchdowns his first season as a starter. That 2022 season. That was, to me, the last great Kelce year because he was averaging like 100 receiving yards per game. Like, he was still prime Kelce. But then it was like Sky Moore. They traded for Kadarius Toney, who became infamous for a lot of drops that next season. I mean, they were Juju Smith-Schuster. They were working with a lot of, in the words of Bill Parcells, Jags, just a guy. They were working with a lot of Jags out there offensively. Mahomes still won MVP and won the Super Bowl. Like, it was unreal what he did that 2022 season. 2023 is a little more bumpy, in large part because the main story for the Chiefs, they led the league in drops, and Mahomes still led him to the Super Bowl. And this season, despite some of the additions at receiver, they couldn't stay healthy because you had Rashee Rice, who tore his ACL in week 4. Now, he could also be dealing with there's some legal stuff pending with him, a suspension. My guess is he probably gets 4 to 6 games, but he comes back in October this year. Xavier Worthy shows some real signs, particularly on deep balls. I get it was in garbage time, but at the end of that Super Bowl against Philly as Mahomes' new deep ball threat. Kelce is not the player he once was, but he's still a great red zone threat. He's still a good 3rd down and 7 guy, safety blanket for Mahomes. I think with the conversation right now about Kansas City, where it was all of last season, and man, I was the front runner of this, of saying, am I watching the same Chiefs team as everybody else is? Like, we do realize they won 15 games, were the back-to-back champs, and went to another Super Bowl. They were a great team. Eagles were a much better team. That's what we saw during the Super Bowl in New Orleans. But people act like it was because of the ref stuff and it's rigged and whatever. That's what happens. Anytime you have a dynasty, it's always rigged. It was rigged for the Patriots, rigged for the Warriors, rigged for the Chiefs. That's what fans of losing franchises tend to say because they're jealous of said great franchise's success. With all of that carryover into 2025, with the threat that it feels like this might be Kelce's last season, from Mahomes, it's, man, Josh Allen won the MVP last year. Burrow, there were discussions about him winning league MVP despite going 9-8, missing the playoffs because of the season he had. Lamar had the best year of his career last year and won the MVP the year before. I think people forgot how great I am because people label those that aren't delusional and think that the games are rigged for the Chiefs. There are those that have labeled me as, like, he's still great, but we've seen the best of Mahomes. The 2 MVP years, 2018 and then 2022. Not that we've necessarily seen the last of Mahomes winning titles, but in this current iteration of the Chiefs dynasty, we've seen the last of that. Mahomes is an all-time great athlete. I think he's the 2nd greatest quarterback ever. He can be no lower, as far as I'm concerned, than 3rd. If you want to make a case Montana above Mahomes, feel free. That's a legit case to make. He obviously isn't in Brady's category yet. I put him over every quarterback ever. Elway, Manning, Marino, doesn't matter. If there's one thing I know about all-time great athletes, particularly those that are champions early in their career, they tend to have seasons and moments where they remind you, this is what I'm about. I'm not even saying the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl. I think right now, as much as this sickens me to say as a Steelers fan, Baltimore would be my lean. Now, the problem is I don't trust Lamar in January, but Baltimore would be my lean for who wins the AFC. Although, do not knock out the Chiefs. Don't forget about the Chiefs. I'd say Buffalo, but Kansas City literally owns them. Bill's best chance of making a Super Bowl is for like Baltimore, Cincinnati, or somebody, Houston, to knock out Kansas City before they get to Buffalo because Allen Mahomes, that's been pretty one-sided. I'm saying forget the title contention for the Chiefs, which they're still in. I think this is going to be like a 40-touchdown season for Mahomes. Xavier Worthy's back as your deep ball guy. Rashee Rice, post, we assume, suspension, will be back as your good route runner. He was really good at the end of that 2023 season when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. You do have Hollywood Brown as your number 3. That works. So I think if there's one thing I've learned about Kansas City watching them throughout this dynasty is that every single moment you think that they're kind of going to fade away, like when they lost Tyreek Hill after 2021, they usually come back with a brand new punch. And certainly Mahomes does. As the leader of this dynasty, I think we're going to see an MVP caliber season from Patrick. I think we're going to see anywhere from 35 to 40 touchdowns from Mahomes this year. This is going to be very similar, not totally equivalent because the guy I'm about to mention had a bad team around him where Mahomes doesn't. And this is a cross-sport example. But I remember very well when my Golden State Warriors were comparing dynasties, and there are some similarities cross-sport between Steph and Mahomes. The Warriors lost the 19 finals, came back in 20, were obviously a significantly diminished version of themselves because KD left, Clay was hurt. Steph got hurt 4 games into the season, played 1 more game, and then COVID hit. Steph didn't play. Steph between October of 2019 and December 2020 played 1 basketball game because of the injury and then because of the pandemic, and the Warriors didn't qualify for the bubble. And in that period, particularly during the bubble, it was, Kenny Smith, shout out Kenny Smith. He's on the best basketball show of all time. But Kenny Smith, others were kind of starting to whisper, if not outwardly proclaim, Dame's better than Steph. Damian Lillard is better than Steph Curry. And Steph at one point even, I think, mentioned Kenny in a tweet. Steph never goes out publicly and calls out people. He did in this spot, like, Kenny, watch yourself. 5 games into that season, Steph Curry plays 6 games into that season. Steph Curry plays Damian Lillard and drops a career-high 63 points. And was kind of like, Dame's great. Don't forget who I am. I'm still that dude. With the discussion around Lamar, Josh, and to a degree Burrow, and Hurts, by the way, because he beat Mahomes. I think Patrick is kind of seething a little bit with the narrative surrounding Chiefs, with those who feel, Patrick's not quite the same guy, with the fact that this is the best Chiefs receiving core in 4 years. I think he's about to put up a big-time season. I really do. So watch out for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Those that are, I've seen some say, Chargers are going to win the division. Here's the thing with the Chargers, and this is the last thing I'll say before we get out of here. Like, I'm about as big of a fan as Jim Harbaugh as there is. I think he's an awesome coach. I have been a Justin Herbert fan. I loved him out of Oregon in 2020. I think his tangible gifts are off the charts. Arm strength, mobility, size. I feel like how people view Justin Herbert, that quarterback is better than the actual quarterback, Justin Herbert, if that makes sense. Like, how people view him, he's not that. And he's an excellent quarterback, I believe. Top 10, no question. But when I say Dak's better than Herbert, how could you? Herbert is 0-2 against Dak, 0-2 in the playoffs with a 27-point blown lead to the Jaguars, and then throwing double the picks in the next playoff game he played that he threw in the regular season. So, like, there's certain guys who put above Herbert, people's heads want to blow off. I'm like, what has he accomplished? He's accomplished nothing. That's not to say he won't, because now he has Harbaugh. He is talented. The Chargers roster is pretty solid. I liked their draft. But he needs at some point. It's going into year 6. We got to see it at some point from Justin. Could you win a playoff game? Is that too much to ask? So people that are like, Chargers, they're ahead of the Chiefs. They're going to beat the Chiefs for the division. I think that's nothing short of absurd. Like Denver with Bo Nix, I like. The Raiders have made some nice additions. AFC West is by far the best division in the NFL. It could have 3 playoff teams once again. The Chiefs divisional streak predates Mahomes. Like, they have not won. Think about this. The last time the Chiefs did not win the AFC West, Peyton Manning was still in the league. Peyton's Broncos, even though Peyton had an awful year and missed a lot of time, won the AFC West barely, though, over Kansas City. 2016 on, the Chiefs have run the AFC West. So folks that are just trying to jump, forget to say the Chiefs are no longer a dynasty or champions or whatever. They can't even win their division. That is absurd to me. That is absurd to me. You got the best quarterback in your division. Historically speaking, in the NFL, as long as everybody's healthy, you generally almost always win the division. That's just how it works. So, all right, that is all the time we have for today's show. I appreciate everybody stopping by. As always, be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, at 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on YouTube, as well as on X and Instagram. I'll say this. Pacers win Game 6 and wrap up the series, then we'll have the reaction to that game on Monday. If the Knicks win Game 6 and we get a Game 7, which is what I think will happen, I'll have a post-game reaction show, either Saturday night or Sunday morning. We'll dive a little bit more into that on Monday for reaction to Game 6, and then it'll just be an all Game 7 show. Because, man, I've said this. So I'll talk about at the start of the show. All the pressure's on the Knicks in Game 6. I know people saying, the Pacers have to win. The Pacers have a Game 7 in their back pocket, albeit it's at Madison Square Garden. If the Knicks win Game 6, and again, I want to say, I think they're going to win Game 6 by about 2 points, and Brunson has his first big fourth quarter in a duel with Halliburton. there's equivalent level pressure in Game 7. For the Pacers, it's don't be the 14th team ever to blow a 3-1 lead. And for the Knicks, it's you haven't gone to the finals in 27 years. You haven't won the finals in 52 years. All the fans sitting courtside, again, Spike Lee, Tracy Morgan, Jon Stewart, Chalamet and Kylie Jenner. You better win Game 7 in front of that home fan base. I think it's equivalent level pressure for very, very, very different reasons. So give me the Knicks to win Game 6. And we got the best 2 word in sports, as said by the late, great Bill Russell. Game 7. We will see you guys Monday night. Maybe before that to give a reaction to Game 6 if the Knicks do win. As far as this live show, we'll see you guys on Monday night, 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific time. Maybe a preview of the finals at that point. Everybody stay safe out there. God bless y'all. Peace out. Get it done, Brunson. Come on now. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.